Well, we're in a short series called Little Legends of the Bible, in which we're looking at some of the lesser-known characters to see the part they play in God's story. Hopefully, we'll be encouraged to realize that although we might not be a Moses, a David, or a Paul, even small people like us can make a big difference. That's certainly the case with our second little legend. She's an unnamed Israelite slave girl who served Naaman's wife. But before we get to her, we need to be introduced to Naaman. And that's our first point, introducing Naaman. If we were to have a national hero, I wonder who you might want to see be our national hero. As you do with these things, I Googled it, and according to a BBC programme broadcast in 2002, which was based on a poll, so it's quite out of date, but Britain's heroes are, or were, number one, Winston Churchill, obviously Prime Minister, then Brunel, he was an engineer, Diana, Princess of Wales, Charles Darwin, and fifth place, William Shakespeare, and so on. The list was full of many different people. I'm not sure if you would say they were all heroes, but they certainly made an impact on history, didn't they? But as for Naaman, well, he was a national hero. You see, the Syrians had not been doing too well in war. Incidentally, if your translation says Aram and king of Aram, that's because tribes from Aram have been pouring into Syria and they sort of merged and become one nation. And so they used interchangeably. So Aram, Syria, we're talking about the same thing here. But the Syrians, they were enemies of Israel, and they frequently attacked Israel. But in the Lord's mercy, King Ahab, king of Israel, he had won against them twice, against overwhelming odds. He had been able to fight them off. However, King Ahab was an evil king, and the time for his reign was coming to an end. It had been prophesied, his downfall was coming, and indeed he was hit by a random arrow, and it just says in 1 Kings 22, a certain man drew his bow, and that was it. King Ahab got shot, and he retreated and died shortly afterwards. Now, some people have suggested this certain man, it's an odd phrase, is it certain man was actually Naaman. We don't know, it's speculation, maybe a nice idea. It could have been anyone, really, couldn't it? But perhaps, you never know. But the point was that although it was the Lord who gave Syria the victory over Israel that day, according to 2 Kings 5:1, it was through Naaman the victory was given. So the Lord was there behind it, orchestrating it, enabling it to happen. But the man he used was Naaman to give Syria the victory. So after 2 devastating defeats, Syria finally wins. So Naaman was something of a national hero. And he certainly fits the role of hero very well. So look at how the Bible describes him. Verse 1, he is commander of the army of the king of Syria. So right away we know he's powerful, he's an important man. And with victory would come rewards, so he's going to be wealthy. And we can see that by the gifts he brings Elisha, verse 5. He wasn't short of a bob or two, this guy. He comes with chariots and horses and all this treasures. Verse 1 also mentions how his master, the king of Aram or Syrian, viewed him as a great man. So he's highly favoured, he's well connected, and it's likely the king would want to give him everything he could because this guy is important. He's a good ally. He's a strong man. He needs this Naaman on his side. So he would be trying to keep Naaman sweet. And Naaman, he wasn't just a strategist planning from behind his desk. Look at the end of verse 1. He was a mighty man of valor. That sounds good, doesn't it? A mighty man of valor. We don't sort of talk about people in that way, but wouldn't you like to be described as a mighty man or woman of valor? Fee, a mighty woman of valor, or, I don't know, Aaron, a mighty man of valor. I mean, you're just like, wow, who says that about people? We don't say that anymore, do we? But there it is. This is a man with it all. He had the victory, he had the honor, he had the power, the wealth, the respect, the bravery, the influence. I mean, what a guy. It's the kind of guy you'd want on your side in a tight spot, isn't it? You know, what he couldn't fight his way out of, he could have a word with the king and get them removed, or just pay his way out of it. He's got everything. And perhaps you know people like that who just seem to have everything. Physically, they're fit and strong and don't seem to get unwell. Mentally, they're at the top of their game and they've got so much money, and they're almost like a different breed of person, aren't they? And you can sort of see them and you go, well, they're there, and then I'm down here somewhere. Naaman was top of the class. But there was one big problem. He had leprosy. Now, leprosy was a word that was used to cover a multitude of different skin conditions back then, much more than just what we call modern leprosy. Unlike today, there was no cure back then, so Israel had a law in place to prevent a national outbreak. Funnily enough, it's not too dissimilar to how the modern world responded to COVID. Isolation was the answer to leprosy, Leviticus chapter 13, verse 46. And it's just funny, isn't it, how everyone was going on about sort of lockdown and everything being such an attack on our civil and religious freedoms. But actually, it's nothing new at all. If you have a contagious disease, don't go near others and give it to them. It's kind of it's common sense, isn't it, really? And humanity has been doing it for centuries. Anyway, Israel weren't the only ones to have this sort of people-protecting law in place. And sadly, what came with leprosy was also the social stigma of it all too. And so Naaman, he goes from this brilliant life, his success, his favor, his victory, his respect, everything that he had, and that comes crashing down around him. He can't fight his way out of this one. The king couldn't pull any strings to get him out of it, and no amount of money can help him. And as for his national god, Rimmon, he was no good. It was a false god. There was no help there. So I hope you can sort of catch a sense of Naaman's situation. I mean, how well known the leprosy was at this point. Maybe it was on a part of his body that couldn't be seen. We don't know. He still seems to be mixing with people to some degree. But he's very soon going to go from hero to outcast. From being the one that everyone wants to be near, oh, I'm a friend with Naaman, to the one that no one wants to be near. There is no hope for his future. Only a fearful expectation of isolation and possibly death. Since 1982, we've had a cure for modern leprosy, but so far no one's cured death, have they? And so whilst many people that we can look at in the media and so on, they can look so strong, so successful, and we can look at people and think, well, they've got it all. They don't seem to have all the worries of life and everything else. All humanity has got the same basic problem, and that is sin. We are heavily infected with sin. And that eventually leads to death. And whilst there is no man-made cure, there is a cure for this thing called sin. But before we get there, we need to meet someone else. We need to meet the one who can help Naaman. So let me introduce you to a young girl, and that's our next point, introducing a young girl. As a father of two youngish girls, two daughters, this has a freshness on me which perhaps it didn't have before. The idea of someone taking your daughter to another country and using her as a slave, it's like, that's hard to deal with, isn't it? I don't know how old this young girl was when she was taken. She's old enough to remember the things she's been taught about the Lord, and yet she's young enough to still be referred to as a little child, although little can just mean small and insignificant. But this is heartbreaking, isn't it? She's kidnapped from her family. Her parents possibly killed. Maybe she saw that. Maybe her village had been torched. We don't know. But she's stolen away, along with all of her hopes, her dreams for the future. It's all gone, just like that. It's gone. Her life is changed. It seems she had a godly upbringing, which was something of a rare thing in Israel in those days, but her family seemed to have been loyal to the Lord, and yet that didn't insulate her from this problems, this nightmare that's suddenly come upon her. Now, if you're a young person, a teenager here, I wonder how you might feel if tomorrow the UK was invaded and you were taken hostage and forced into slavery. You can't take it seriously, can you? You can't comprehend how that would feel. If you were taken away from everything and everyone, suddenly there was no school tomorrow, that's it, boom, you're gone. It's hard to imagine, and yet this is the tragedy that she faces. And the amazing thing is, her faith in God, despite this tragedy that's come, her faith in God still holds. I find that quite remarkable, really. Perhaps she held on to the truth that the God who is over sort of nations and international affairs and wars, the God who's over all those big things, he is over her personal circumstances too. It would be so easy to become bitter and disillusioned about this thing that's happened in her life. And yet she holds firmly onto God. And young people, and everyone else as well, but young people, I hope this girl is an inspiration for you. I hope the Lord isn't someone you just come along to hear about on a Sunday because that's what you have to do because your parents bring you. I hope and pray that the Lord is someone that you speak to, that you know yourself, that you pray to, that your trust is in him for yourself, so that if all the props of your life were taken away and your life fell apart, that your faith would hold just like hers. It's challenging, isn't it? Actually, I don't think we realise how much we rely on other things until the Lord sort of wobbles some of those things we trust in, like the job, the family, the security, the money. Once he starts to take those things away, you go, what's going on? And it is scary. That's a test for our faith. This is what this young girl went through. They were all taken away. Her faith holds. Now, when your faith or your trust is firmly in the Lord, that allows you to know peace even as your world is falling apart. And that's what we see here. She doesn't just endure it and get on with it, bitterly spending her time wishing that things had been different, saying, God, why did you allow this to happen? Maybe she had days like that. But the overarching thing is she still trusts in God. That's still there. And that solid faith in the Lord. And gives her the freedom to trust the Lord in the way that she does, even in this awful situation. And remarkably, she puts into practice something Jesus underlines. Centuries later, in Matthew chapter 5, she's loving her enemy. The guys behind her kidnap, she's loving them. That's amazing, isn't it? Not in a begrudging way, but she truly seems to want the best for the family she's with. So she sees Naaman's suffering and the effect that's going to have on his wife and the family. And this just gets more mind-blowing. You see, this little, insignificant foreign servant girl with no name, we don't even know her name, she has the answer to Naaman's problem. She has a hope to offer. She could have just sat back, speculated, well, this is God's judgment on him. He deserved this. He had this coming. I'm just going to sit here and watch this. Some Christians are like that, aren't we? We look at people, things go wrong in their lives and go, well, they had that coming. She doesn't try to be judge and sort of second guess what God's doing. It's really dangerous when we do that and sort of say, oh, well, of course that happened to that person because you know, of that, everything else. You know, we don't know what God is doing half the time. Guesswork is a dangerous thing. She leaves the judging up to God. But as for her, she's filled with compassion, and that's such a beautiful thing. when Christians are filled with compassion. It's how it should be. It's a godly attribute. That's how God revealed himself to Moses. Exodus 34, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God. That's wonderful that we've got a compassionate and gracious God, isn't it? It's such good news. And here we see that she has the same heart. She has compassion, and her compassion and her faith are working together, and it's dynamite when faith and compassion work together. Things happen then. What faith she had. Look at what she says to her mistress in verse 3. Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy. She may be small and insignificant, and yet her faith is mountainous, isn't it? Whatever age she's been stolen away at, she knew enough about Elisha, enough about God to know he can do something here. God can enter into this situation and change it. She knew enough to know that God is working through Elisha in amazing ways. And yet we do need to note this wasn't an everyday occurrence. It's not like she sat there in Israel and watched loads of people being healed from leprosy. She's like, oh yeah, Elisha's doing that all the time. No, Jesus says in Luke 4:27, there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed. Only Naaman, the Syrian. Her faith is this settled confidence and trust in the Lord. She knows the kind of God she believes in. She's living by the principle we find in the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we live by faith, not by sight. So humanly speaking, her life and her future, it was a complete disaster. It didn't get much worse than this. And very often as we look in our lives, things happen and we think, why did God allow that to happen? Why am I struggling in this way? Why don't I have those things? Why is it so hard? Why has God allowed that? And it's really hard, isn't it? We don't find ourselves in the situation we think we would like to be in. And yet she, in that situation, she chooses to trust. Isn't that an encouragement to us in our difficulties, in our discouragements, when things are just not going as we thought they should be? She's trusting in God anyway. And she speaks out. She's motivated by this faith, by her compassion. And in doing so, she's making herself vulnerable. It's a massive thing for her to do. What if it hadn't worked? What if Elisha had refused to see him? What if Elisha was dead? She didn't know. What if God hadn't healed in this circumstance? What if Naaman felt he was just being made a fool of? And who was she anyway to think she could help this national hero? She's a no one. And yet who is she? She's someone who knows God. That's who she is. She didn't do much, but the little she does goes a long way. And that's the thing with God. If you trust him with a little, he can do amazing things with that. We might think, who are we to speak about matters of life and death and eternity? We feel so scared, don't we, when we think, oh, it's an opportunity to speak about Jesus, and but what they think about me is scary. But the truth is, no matter how intellectual someone is, no matter how powerful they are, no matter how successful or strong or influential someone is, they still have the fundamental problem of all humanity, and that is sin, which will eventually kill them. And as insignificant as you and I am, we know the answer. That's amazing, isn't it? We have the answer. And sometimes all it takes is a brave and timely word. So can I encourage you? We might not know how it's going to turn out, but let's be what we're called to be, and that is a faithful people. Let's be a compassionate people. So when the moment's right, we open our mouth and we speak about Jesus. That's what we're called to do. We're not called to save anyone ourselves. We're not called to move mountains or anything. We're just called to be faithful and compassionate and speak about Jesus. Jesus is the cure to the world's biggest problem, sin. So let's see how this progresses on our final point, introducing the gospel. Imagine for a moment that Russia and Ukraine had a ceasefire. Perhaps there were a few skirmishes around the border every now and again, but there was a kind of peace. It's fragile, but it was holding. That would be good news, wouldn't it? But then one of Vladimir Putin's top men contracts cancer. So Putin sends him to Zelensky, asking him to cure the cancer. That would be a difficult situation, wouldn't it? That's kind of what was going on back then. At this point in history, there was an uneasy peace between Syria and Israel. It's delicate, but it's there. Still peppered with raiding parties from both sides, but treading on ice is the name of the game at this point in history. And that's why King of Israel is in such a state when he gets this impossible request sent to him: heal Naaman's leprosy. That's impossible. You might as well ask me to raise someone from the dead. I just can't do it. What's this guy on about? What is he thinking? I can't do it. He fears this is a pretext for an invasion. Unlike the insignificant, unknown slave girl, this king of Israel doesn't think of God. He just says, I'm not God, I can't do this. He shows no faith. He doesn't even call for the prophet Elisha. He's just tearing his robe, saying, well, we're stuffed then. He was the king. He was meant to be a leader in the faith, but he doesn't have any. Sadly, that reflected much of Israel at that time. So here's Naaman, this proud hero, coming into enemy territory, swallowing his pride and going to the enemy asking for healing. It's all a delicate situation. But for Naaman personally, this is quite a humbling thing. This is a desperate measure. I wonder if you've ever considered, why does Naaman actually listen to this nobody of a slave girl? Why does this great man even entertain this bonkers suggestion in the first place? I once knew a chap who had a bit of a problem. The problem was, whenever he spoke, he lost his grip on truth and reality, and he would just say whatever he wanted. And after getting to know him, you just knew he was a liar, unfortunately. He couldn't seem to tell the truth. It was a really sad thing. And he'd be telling you, and you'd think, do you actually expect me to believe that? I can't believe you. You just know. It's so bonkers. And it was a shame. I mean, the guy was nice, but he just couldn't seem to speak the truth. But I'm sure you do know people that you trust. You know, most people you think, okay, basically I trust them. You know, I think they're going to tell me the truth, especially if they've got a good character, and you trust them. Now, it could be that Naaman had heard about the exploits of Israel's past prophets. Maybe he'd even heard about Elijah and Elisha, so maybe that's why he's inclined to believe what she says. It could be that he's just so desperate at this point, he's willing to try anything. Maybe it's a combination of them. Or, and I think it definitely includes this one, it could be something about this girl. Something about her character. Something about her honesty, her integrity as she serves. Something about her as it impressed him. He thinks, no, I can trust her. So when she speaks, he couldn't just dismiss it as childish delusions. Actually, she said this, and do you know what? I believe her. It's worth investigating. And the way we are actually has an impact. Our character has an impact in how people respond to us, in whether they believe us. So the way we respond to the trials in our life, the way we are at work, the way we are with our husband or wife, the way we deal with our children, All of these things have an impact on how seriously people listen to us and whether they think they've actually got something worth believing in, worth taking seriously. It's not about whether your life is going really well or not. It's often how you deal with that and how you demonstrate your faith in God makes a difference to what's going on. That's the key. So it is a little bit speculative, but I think we can safely say if this young girl had been completely untrustworthy, a complete scallywag with a major attitude problem, he wouldn't have listened to her. No, I'm not going to listen to you. She was something else. This great man wouldn't have risked putting his reputation on the line and travelled to seek mercy from his enemy if he thought this girl was having a laugh. Now, we've read the account. I'm not going to relay all the details of what happened. It's a great story. It doesn't finish where we read. It carries on, so feel free to go home and read the rest of it. But I'm just going to draw out a couple of details as we sort of draw to a close. You might have found it curious as to why Elisha didn't go out to him. Was he just being rude? Was he cooking his dinner and just couldn't be bothered to go out? What's going on there? Well, I think the issue is Naaman has got an issue. He's got a pride issue. He still believes that he's someone. He believes he's entitled to something. He rolls up with his chariots and his horses. He's the big man. He thinks he's got something to offer. He turns up and expects to be treated with respect as if this is some sort of transaction, like he's going to a shop and is going to pay his money and get the healing. And of course they're going to serve me because I'm Naaman, the great warrior, the man of valor. They're going to serve me. They're going to give me the special treatment. But Elisha doesn't want his money. And healing from God isn't something to be bought or sold or a right that we can claim. Furthermore, Naaman was the enemy. If any healing was going to happen, it wasn't going to be on the basis of who Naaman was, because he was the enemy. If any healing was going to happen, it was on the basis of God's undeserved mercy to him. And Naaman needs to recognize he's not entitled to this. In fact, he doesn't even deserve an audience with this prophet who represents God. But this great, valiant man, he struggles with this exercise in humility because he still thinks, I'm someone. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I've done? You should be privileged to have me here. You know, crumbs, come out to me and bow down before me. But in reality, actually, isn't that where so many people fall down when they come to God, when they come to Jesus? We puff up our chests and think, I'm someone. I'm important. If you knew what I did, the kind of guy I am, wow, you know. Actually, we come to God and we think we've got something to bring, but the only thing we bring to the plate is our sin and rebellion. If we are to be saved, if there is to be this spiritual healing, it's not because we deserve it. It's just down to God's undeserved mercy. It's humbling. People don't like to hear it. And neither does this proud but dying Naaman. And so he walks off in a huff, in a rage. Here's the healing being offered to him. And he's like, whoa, I'm not having that. He's too proud. Isn't that the problem with so many of us? Pride. How dare you? I'm Naaman. I'm not just a good man. I'm a great man. My rivers are better off than your stinky little snivelling stagnant messes of streams you have here. I'm not going to dirty myself with cleaning and washing in those rivers. He expected some kind of display of hocus pocus, some sort of special chanting and waving to simply wash in the Jordan. That was far too easy, too humiliating. What a waste of time. And of course, that's what happens often when we present the cross of Jesus. It can just seem too easy. It's too simple just to put your trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, there must be more to it, the washing in the blood of Jesus by trusting in him. Give me some sort of special sign. Give me a task to do. Give me some pilgrimage I can perform. Give me a mountain to climb, a lion to tame, some ritual to perform. And yet it's simply by turning from our sin and trusting in what Jesus has done, that is how we are saved. There's no hocus pocus required. Thankfully for Naaman, his servants save him from his own pride and convince him and to do it, and he does, and he's clean. And in that moment, he's changed. He still needs discipling and teaching like we all do. He's still got some funny ideas there. But now in verse 15, he declares there to be no God in all the earth but Israel. Verse 17, he vows to only offer sacrifices to the Lord. It seems that he's a changed man on the outside, but also on the inside too. And I want to encourage you with this. If you'd said to that slave girl, before she'd been abducted, one day you're going to be responsible for the commander of the enemy army coming to worship the Lord, she would have said, don't be daft, I'm just a no one. What a silly idea. If you'd said to her, God's got a purpose for you in the tragedy you're going through, in the heartbreak, the tears, all those things you're going through. If you'd said to him, God's got a purpose for you, that would have been really hard for her to accept and take at that time, wouldn't it? And yet he did have a purpose. God, through her, took this man, this unlikely man, and saved him for eternity. We don't know how her story ends. Was she set free? Was she accepted as one of the family? Did she now become Naaman's discipler or teacher? Did the whole family come to believe? We don't know. Who knows how far this little act of courageous compassion ended up going. So you, young person, young people, you people who think perhaps you're not very important, or you don't have a big role to play, you don't have massive, huge, earth-changing gifts, you who perhaps feel so unworthy, you who feel not up to the task and like, I could never speak about Jesus, you don't know how scared I am, you who feel so vulnerable when you think about these things, be encouraged. The world has got a big problem. And yet you, Christian, you know the answer. You don't need to be a hero. Jesus is the hero. But you do need to be faithful and compassionate. And then who knows what the Lord might do through you.